don't I pick up with the just before we forget that previous question that was asked. So I kind of glossed over this. I was going through my stuff pretty quick in the beginning. So the idea behind GLAM is an easy way to put scenes together using markup. But under the covers, there's a lot going on. If any of you have built an application in WebGL, and Brandon flashed some raw WebGL code up on the screen, and then he showed 3.js after that. You know, when you write WebGL, you're writing a lot of code. And if you write 3.js, a JavaScript library, you can write about 3 to 10 times less code than you would write in WebGL. But even with that, writing 3.js, it's a lot of work. And you find yourself doing a lot of the same things over and over again. And it's not structured. It's not declared in a way that you can then query it, index it, and do all these other wonderful things that we can do with markup. So I created this markup system for making 3D content. So it's not specifically like modeling software. It's more like the interactive layer, like building things in HTML and CSS. The actual 3D assets then can get created in code using 3.js to programmatically make your geometry, or loading in files from OBJs or Collada or STL or these other 3D formats that are out there. So I hope that gave at least a partial answer to your question.
Hello, Tony, Josh, David, Patrick, Brandon.
Right.
So if I were an investor, and I'm not, but if I were one, and I was looking at 2 virtual reality startups, right? And the teams are similar, the products are similar, but the way in which they differ is one of them is open source and the other one is closed. Why would I go with the open source startup?
I think it really depends on what they're building, what the product is, you know? It's it.
Can you expand on the from an investment point of view, what are the advantages of the open source style or route?
Well, I think that the answer still is it depends on the product, because you know, open source can be very, very advantageous for certain types of products, especially. So we like to talk about the metaverse, or you know, the Matrix, stuff like that, and or what's the other book? Ready Player One. I forget what they call it in there. Oasis. You know, that was actually a big part of the storyline, was the fact that Oasis was an open source platform. Nobody owned it. There was one company that was running it, but you know, anybody could contribute to it. And that's what made it what it was in the story. Now, obviously, this is a fictional book, but we see that same pattern play out in the real world, where you know, if something's closed source, then you've got one company that can put it out, and it can be the most awesome thing ever, but eventually that company's going to lose interest, support's going to die off, and unless they do something drastic at the end of life, like open source it, it'll eventually fade away. Whereas you know, open source projects can grow this life of their own that just goes on and wildly exceeds the creator's expectations. I'm going to use a closed source example as an open source, but Minecraft. So Minecraft is Java, so it is open source, no matter what anybody else wants to tell you. And if not for the fact that players could get to the code and modify it in some way, shape, or form, I don't believe that Minecraft would be what it is today. Microsoft would not have bought it for $2 billion. You know, it's because the community can contribute that makes these products what they are. And so if that's the type of product you want to build, of course it has to be open source. But if you want to build something that's, you know, more like your standard traditional commercial AAA game, then yeah, good for you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. No, that's it.
Hello. So there's been like a lot of attempts to sort of optimize the way that we interact with computers. And with that, you know, there's been ergonomic keyboards and stuff like that. But with something like leap motion, where the granularity of control that you have and being able to articulate certain things, when do you guys foresee a future where, you know, things like leap motion would replace more legacy input options like a mouse and keyboard?
So for the leap motion was not meant to sort of immediately destroy all other input devices. Some people will say there was, it wasn't. But So I guess, are you specifically for virtual reality or in general, or?
Yeah, more in general
Okay.
applications.
So as computing becomes more mobile, obviously, like these older input devices start to fade away. Like there's no mouse on your phone because you're not going to carry around a mouse with you, and
Right.
you can argue whether or not it has a keyboard. So I think as we get the thing that I see that happens probably, I think that's probably going to win or happen soonest is we're going to get these really good transparent worn displays. And so you're going to need to have some kind of input device that follows you around with that. You take your hands everywhere you go, so there's something to say said about that. But also there'll be a lot of sort of objects and environmental stuff too. So like maybe I look at my table and I have like a whole touch interface on my table and I can do my 2010 era smart typing on there. Or maybe I have this sort of mouth tracking enhanced voice, and there's a whole lot of things that you'll probably see. So multimodal interfaces will probably kill all of these old sort of single modal interfaces. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I had a question about security. I came out of the horrible world of the download monetization, and which was kind of a result of Web 2.0, the idea of everything should be free. And so I'd like to know what you can do, one, to protect the content creators, so they can get value out of their content. And secondly, what are you going to do to protect the consumer from the things that happen in downloads where you get spyware, toolbars you really don't want popping up in the virtual world?
This is so beyond my pay grade. But what I would do as the head of security at Mozilla, I can't speak to I mean, actually, my first reaction is the response may be similar to what we have. I don't know if virtual reality fundamentally changes the security model, for example, at the deep layer. Again, it's so far beyond my pay grade. But with the user agent, I do think there are opportunities to make it appealing to eat your vegetables. I've tried to make people care about security in a 2D browser. It's hard. It's an abstract notion. It's complicated. Even if you do care, it's not necessarily effective, and it's got a bad rap for any number of reasons, starting with McAfee and shit like that. But in virtual reality, maybe we can anthropomorphize things, as I was saying in my talk. There might be an opportunity here to make security actually fun, and to kind of abuse a well-worn term, maybe to gamify it a little bit. And maybe that becomes a basis of competition between browsers. So maybe there's one browser that gamifies security and makes you care about it because it's just fun. It's part of why you actually use the browser. When I was thinking about, what would a VR browser look like? I was looking at things like Minecraft and things like that and trying to think of the engagement curve and kind of the first 50 seconds of your experience and then what you're going to be experiencing 3 hours later and 3 weeks later. And maybe one of the ways we make browsers kind of interactive and fun, maybe the kind of creepy crawlies you get in the first night in Minecraft are trackers. And you're kind of swatting away at them. You're like, what the fuck are these things, Sorry for the kids watching at home. I think there's a lot of opportunities there to from a user experience standpoint, to make people care about something that has been hard to make them care about in the past.
Yeah, so adding my expertise as the head of security at Google, which I'm not, for one, just know that security is absolutely the top priority of I think any of the browsers right now, and if I cannot convince the security guys that WebVR is secure, it's not going to go into the browser, like point blank. That's the onus is on us as developers to make sure it's secure. We have a great security team who is really, really anal. And they need to be. It's their job to be. And so, and on the browser side, like if you look at a lot of the forums that are built up around like the Oculus community right now, there is a whole bunch of them that have these developers who are super eager to experiment and do these UI or animation experiments, and they're like, oh yeah, check out this player character model that I put, and I have this eye tracking in there, and they link to something off of mega.co that's a 300 megabyte Unity native download, and it would be really hard to be less secure than that. The browser is all about security, and that will carry through into whatever form VR takes there.
And-
On the monetization side, I've actually blogged about this a little bit. It's hard for, I think, content creators coming from more traditional media to look at it and say, I can't encrypt my content. I can't, DRM is a very tricky thing on the web. But it's really a question of, what are you trying to protect? Are you trying to protect art assets? Maybe. And that's difficult on the web, no question. But oftentimes, I think what you're trying to protect is the overall experience. And that's something that you provide through your servers, and you provide through your customer support, and you provide through your services. And those are things that are very difficult to steal. And so that's the direction I see, not just VR, but all content on the web going.
I'd just add to that. I mean, if you look at every major medium, one of the foundational bedrocks of monetizing it is advertising, right? I mean, that doesn't even exist in VR yet. So, that there are huge holes and opportunities all over the place if VR really as it starts to accelerate. So, somebody's got to figure that out.
Right. I was wondering about the transformations that are required for the eyes towards the bulging out that was talked about. Is that just a mathematical change, like based on the form factor of our lenses in our eyes? And how much diversity is there between people? Are some people going to get sick around that, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a really excellent question, and I completely skimmed over it in my presentation. It depends, and what we're seeing right now is kind of an evolution of how this works. If you look at where the original Oculus DK1 was versus what DK2 is doing versus what Cardboard's doing versus what like Crescent Bay or Sony Morpheus are doing with their lenses, there's a huge variety of them out there, and they're not always things that can be like really cleanly described. In nice mathematical terms, sometimes you need like lookup tables and whatnot. And the goal of WebVR is to make sure that you never have to worry about that as much as possible. So a good example of how we're doing this on the Oculus side is when you set up your Oculus Rift, you go through a configuration utility and you do a quick little test, and it sets up what your IPD is. They've done all the work, all the hard magic to come up with the algorithms that describe how the distortion looks from your particular eye viewpoints. And then they return to me in the browser a mesh that describes how that distortion works. I then take the texture that you rendered through WebGL, apply it against that mesh, do any little like time warpy distortions that we need to do, and present that to the screen. So really the hard work there is being done by the person who made the headset, and they're the people that are in the best position to know. And if they do a crummy job, unfortunately it's going to kind of come out crummy, but thus far, especially Oculus and the Cardboard team, they know what they're doing, and it's working out well.
Thank you.
Cool. Start this thing. Hi, my name is Suyasha, and I like to do a lot of creative coding, and I'm super excited about using web programming skills and doing something in virtual reality. A few questions. First of all, I'd like to thank DIY VR for the hat, and especially I like the VR mount because I had another cardboard in the box, but it's such a pain to just keep holding it on with the phone inside it, and the mount is like, it makes it easy. My question is, can you give us some examples of apps you've seen or ideas? Like I've seen a lot of games, but besides games, because I don't develop games, I don't develop on Unity yet, but I may have to learn it. But anything else I can do on VR besides game? The person from Mozilla, he showed the Wikipedia on it. I personally wouldn't want to make an app that you're reading a bunch of text on a head-mounted device. It's better to read it on the laptop or something like that. But anything regarding where you are actually leveraging VR capability and rich multimedia.
Well, just to pick up on your Wikipedia example for a second, I agree. You don't want to be sitting there just looking around at a bunch of flat pages up, in front of you in 3D necessarily, and especially you don't want to do that in the near term because text rendering just isn't that great yet, as Josh was alluding to, though it will get great soon. But imagine, if you will, you want to learn about the universe. Now you're in a virtual reality simulation where you're flying through the solar system and you're flying through our galaxies and you're learning about physics. Imagine Cosmos, the TV series, either the original one or the remade one. Imagine being able to do that in virtual reality. But then now when you want to get some more information on anything you're looking at, there's just, the Wikipedia page is just a touch away and now it can pop up. Hopefully, well rendered because someone's made the VR-ready version of that Wikipedia page. It's just got enough lines of text to give you the information, but it's not going to kill you with crappy text. So just imagine that now. It's the same application as Wikipedia, but in a completely different presentation. That's just one example.
I'd say there's also, a lot of live content right now that's coming out. Jaunt has published a bunch of concert footage. You're on stage with Paul McCartney or Jack White. Grade A, content. Autodesk is doing really interesting things where they're letting using their CAD software. They're letting the WebGL. They're basically passing that CAD information into WebGL format, so you could start looking at 3D models for architecture or other applications like that. One of the fun applications I've used that my friends have kind of been surprised with, the Photosphere feature on your Google Camera app. If you take a 360-degree photo with that, you can view it in Cardboard VR. So it's the simplest way for you to create your own VR content ever. And I've done that at my friends' weddings, and they lose their shit. They're blown away.
The thing I'd add to that too, is this on? Don't get too hung up on the front end. That's the least important part. Think about the job to be done. Why do you go to Wikipedia? Why do you go to YouTube? Why do you go to a porn site? Why do you socialize with your friend? And I'm quite serious. Do not get caught up on the front end manifestation of the current web. That is the least important part. It's the easiest part to swap out. Just think about what makes the web special at a very deep architectural level. And then think about the jobs you hire the web to do. So Wikipedia, for example, if we're hiring it for education, well, that could be me with my class stepping into a representation of Muir Woods with my teacher being there, and maybe little minor excerpts of data being fed in an opportunistic fashion through an open Wikipedia API. So leveraging the web we have and synthesizing new experiences from it on the fly while staying true to the same fundamental job that we hired that site to do, in this case, education. There's kind of a common, the most common thing we do when we see a new form factor or a new breakthrough in computing, whether it's desktop replacing mainframes or mobile replacing desktop, is we kind of have a struggle at the beginning to kind of see what it's going to be good for. Focus on the fundamental strengths of the platform, plus the fundamental strengths of the new medium. And honestly, I tell you, we get in front of a whiteboard at Mozilla, we shake our sleeves, and 100 startups fall out. If you can't think of 100 ways to monetize this, you're hopeless. It's going to be easy.
Cool.
I see you there, and I want to give a really quick example of a very practical real-world commercial application that you can see right now. There's a company called Matterport. I believe they're in Mountain View, and they do real estate walkthroughs. That's not all they do, but they have this basically a street view camera that they can take to your real estate listing, plop it around there, and they build a 3D model of your home. It's on the web. It's in WebGL. You can go to their site. It's Matterport.com, I think. And you can see this right now, and it is incredible. And they've experimented with they've been experimenting with VR. They've shown it off at a couple of meetups, and it is the most incredible thing ever to put on the headset and be I'm standing in somebody else's kitchen. And so you think about that in terms of, okay, if I'm browsing a site like Zillow and I'm scrolling down through the list and one of the listings has a button that says, walk through this home right now. And you click that button, what would you prefer to see? The thing come up and say, put on your headset and go? Or So now if you go and download this Unity application and open this and then download this content pack, blah, 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 no. You don't want that. You want to be able to say, walk through now. And that's an incredibly compelling real-world commercial use that I think is going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, and you've seen like these little plug-in things online where like people are clicking and dragging and they're trying to do 360, but it's in this little window inside of the window of your browser, inside of the window of your screen, and it like just looks awful, So like, figure out a way to get that content into like a VR mode. That would be great.
Okay.
Also, shameless plug, like the hat mount that you were excited about. We have a booth at the Upload VR event if you want to go and buy one with the hats too. Another reason to go there after this.
Cool, thanks.
All right. Time for a few more questions. 6 minutes left. So.
1 minute fast.
Minute each and a half.
How's it going, guys? My name's Ray Chardella. Thank you, by the way. This has been very informative. So I've been using 3D CAD software for industrial design for quite some time, and just recently I've decided to kind of pivot and use my 3D design skills for 3D interfacing, and VR really excites me. I went to the Samsung Developer Conference and got hands-on with the Gear VR, and I'm completely sold on the idea. So my question for you is, how can I translate my 3D CAD design skills into VR? I use Autodesk. I use Autodesk Inventor, so I would like to just code this and make it, VR ready.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Autodesk as like their developer network, there's stuff there that'll tell you like how to get it into WebGL. I can't speak specifically to it, but I know that those tools do exist.
Yeah, there's some. They're coming online. I mean, they have one online viewing product that can probably, I'm sure it reads Inventor files. We have an Autodesk rep here somewhere. Jim, are you here somewhere? You want to quickly answer that about Inventor files in WebGL? Developer.autodesk.com.
Okay.
I just remembered I had a little brain freeze for a second.
Very quickly, you've done the hard part. 3D. That's the hard part. I keep telling my web designer colleagues, you're about to get your ass kicked by visual effects and game designer guys. They have skills that you do not have, and they're a lot harder to acquire. So it's easier for you to learn what I'm good at than it's easy for me to learn what you're good at. Put it that way, in my opinion. So 3D spatial thinking plus interface design, you're good to go. You'll be fine.
Thank you.
Just on a small note on that, like Mr. Doob also has like a lot of converters from different file formats, and there's also a nice online product for viewing 3D.js products called Realworld that you can also check out. I really liked your talks. So I'm a front-end guy, and my specialty is like interface. So the question's like really about text in 3D environments. Like I noticed in your talk, Josh, that you used what looked like to be like a plane over the actual 3D environment you're doing. So like text on the 3D environment's very clunky. Like either you have to like port it over from canvas, you have to do it as a plane, or do you have to actually do 3D text? Like, so what's coming in the future that will make this like less intensive on the actual client?
That's like, so TV comes out and everyone knows the story. If TV comes out, they point cameras at news broadcasters and radio programs, right? It's kind of like the MVP of what you might use a TV camera for. That right there is like the MVP of how you might, in a judo kind of way, leverage existing content and make it work and for VR. I mean, I think it gets very hand-wavy very fast, but my previous comment, like, web design begins to look like architecture or urban planning pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
That will just be the beginning. So I wouldn't get too hung up on text. I would begin to think, I think, about collaborative experiences. So I didn't get to get into this, but I think that one thing that could make the web really special is if we can utilize things like WebRTC, and maybe collaborative browsing can become an integral part of what makes the web special. So WebRTC is a new real-time communication protocol for video and audio on the web. I want to integrate that deeply into a VR browsing experience. So again, you can go to your classroom, you can go to URL at 10:30, look around, your students are there, your teacher's there, and she guides you through an educational experience. So collaborative browsing, I think, could be huge. Yeah, text is kind of like, it's important. It's just the beginning. We'll do a lot more. I think creative people will do really cool stuff with it.
For sure. Thank you so much.
I kind of think it's the other way. I think WebVR, specifically in the browser, lets us actually do deep disruption of the real world. And I know one of my friends over at Magic Leap, and that it's seriously, the reason KKR came in was not like the Me Too. They have deep physical and Qualcomm real world experiences, they think, from an e-commerce and strictly deep data IoT way they can actually disrupt the real world. So the things you're talking about collaborative browsing are the means to do that. Things like visual UIs with motion tied in with IoT data are actually going to let the web go away as being an obtrusive experience. The question is, how does web, VR, and things like high-speed devices and speed up the performance we need with maybe SSDs or whatever, or VM that actually works for SSDs to optimize for it, get us the performance we really need to do that? Because it literally has to process a lot of data faster than we can do. I mean, because that's the real problem we're having now.
I imagine we might start to see some things like, Apple had to rewrite a lot of stuff from scratch to get the good enough performance to do mobile early on. I think we're going to see something similar there, similar to that.
It's the only way to do it. Any questions?
So, boy, that's a complicated question. I mean, there's all sorts of issues that need to be overcome right now, just basic software issues. But there's also an entire class of issues that I see that are a matter of nobody has had a reason to care yet.
Right.
Nobody has had a reason to care that the accelerometer in your phone is really precise. And nobody's had a reason to care about screens that look good when you're right here. And nobody's had a reason to care about browsers that run at higher than 60 frames per second.
Yeah, because VR becomes a security issue. It's like a life and death palpitation,
exactly.
Kill you issue. Yeah.
So, well, I should hope not.
Well, if it's good, it should.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that the long-term solution is just, as this becomes a popular medium, people will have a reason to care, and out of that comes improvements to the entire spectrum.
Exactly.
Last question.
Last question of the night. Thank you very much. It seems like the path of least resistance to creating content for VR is stereo shooting, whether it be just straight single point of view or 360 cameras. Those cameras, however, are all really expensive. And so question for Patrick or for Brandon from Google, have you thought of making a cardboard stereo adapter so that I could capture content as well as consume it?
So actually I don't think it's so much stereo, but like really wide angle. A lot of the video, like with this little camera, this is I think $299 camera. So in terms of camera tech, it's not that expensive, but it's the wide field of angle that it's not 3D, right? It's not stereographic in that way, but it's being able to move your head and not seeing the edge of your field of view. That in my observations, seeing people use VR for the first time, that's the wow factor for them. It's actually, they can't really even tell that it's 3D or not when they're looking at a video or a photo. Like, you can take a 2D photo and wrap it around a dome and do that for them. So I would say just a wide angle camera.
I'll be provocative for a second on that one, just
Yeah,
because
sure.
we're gonna have all these cameras on your head eventually. Like we have our Dragonfly prototype where it's literally 3K cameras where your eyes are, so you can just record, and you're recording what you're seeing, and if you plug that into somebody else's headset, you're just seeing what that person saw. And they're wider field of view too, so you can even pivot a little bit around inside of that once you have that aligned with the gyro. And you can imagine more and more cameras, if you actually care about video recording. And I think a lot of the sensors that are on these headsets will actually become sort of easy content import things. Like, imagine the future, you want your avatar to look like you take your headset off, you point it at your face, 3D scans your face, you put it back on, and now you have your face in VR. Stuff's gonna happen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one final thought to add to that is with So doing stereoscopy in a photosphere or something like that is really hard, to the point of being literally physically impossible to get an optimal solution. If you want to read more about that, go to elevr.com, elevr.com, and read about the fuzzy ball problem. They actually do a really good job of explaining it. But there is an awful lot to be said for having just a monoscopic photosphere, and those are super easy to create. Pull out your Android phone and hit the photosphere, and you could create one of this room right now in 20 seconds.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna
they're
do
great.
it right now.
Yeah, do it.
Those are great products, but just so you know, there was a company in Seattle, Poppy, that did this great little stereoscopic adapter for the iPhone. Sells it for $60. Does a terrific result. And there's a company in Iceland called Kula that's making a stereo adapter that's just a pair of mirrors that'll go on the iPhone. It works really, really well, but it could be $2 if somebody did it in cardboard.
So I've tried to use the Poppy thing for VR, and it actually fails because it doesn't give me a wide enough field of view.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's solvable.
Yeah.
All right. With that, in 20 seconds, we had our picture. Okay, so I'd like to get a big round of applause for all of our speakers. We have a few speaker gifts. Our special SF HTML5 painting for you, and a glass of wine. All right, so watch out for this one. All right, so we'd like to take a picture of all of you speakers over there with this camera. So with that, we're coming to the end of our program on the live stream. I want to thank everyone that's been sticking to this, sticking with us on the live stream. Thanks a lot. With that, we're going to close the live stream. We're going to go to the raffle, and we're going to do that pretty rapid fire. First of all,